I didn't break the planet. It was this way when I found it, all right?
Everybody laughed when I first said I wanted to be a comedian. Well, they're not laughing now, are they?
You know why it's laminated, don't you? To catch the tears of joy.
It's a Celtic phoenix. People are thankfully being stupid again.
Welcome to Gurus of Comedy.
With your host, Dave Keeshan.
Welcome to Gurus of Comedy. Today I'm joined on the line from Mega City 1, or Dublin, pretty much the same thing. Michael Carroll.
Hello, how are you, David? How are you?
Thanks for taking time out today.
Not at all, it's lovely to be here. I'm calling you from the People's Glorious Republic of Clondalkin.
Clondalkin, alright.
Oh, indeed, wow, west side of Dublin. Not too far away from you, I think.
Yeah, I'm in Selbridge. What's Clondalkin's famous native? It's Conor McGregor now, is it?
No, it's me.
Oh, it's you.
Conor McGregor. No, that doesn't ring any bells. Oh, yes, actually, is he one of ours? I don't know. I don't follow football.
Yeah.
Is it football?
No,
yeah,
he plays baseball.
Sure it is.
I think.
A baseball. I knew it was a load of balls. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, Clondalkin doesn't feature very often. So, Michael here, I just vamp you, if you don't mind, is famous, one of the few Irish writers, comic book writers I know, and you've written for Dredd for many years in the comics, and recently you've been writing some novels as well, and the more recent work is The Judges, which kind of covers the early days of the judges in the world of Dredd.
Yep.
Also, behind a series of books you wrote yourself called A New Heroes, an award-winning series. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And you're so prolific, you have to write under a pen name as well. So you also have a series of romantic novels under the name of Jane Carroll.
Just Jay, no Jane.
Joe.
Yeah, just
Jay.
Jaye. Yeah.
J-Y.
Yeah. I know. There's a long story about that, but the short version is they gave me money. So yeah, that's.
I think all stories end at that point, you know.
Yeah,
I was young and I needed the money.
Yeah.
All right. Michael has agreed to come on today to talk about a writer, a sci-fi writer who was quite funny as well, Harry Harrison. He was an American writer who passed away a number of years ago, but he did have a presence in Ireland. He kind of had a home here, and I believe you said you actually consider him almost a mentor.
Oh yeah. Harry moved to Ireland, I think it was like 1978 or 79 or something like that, with his wife. The kids had grown up pretty much by that stage. So they moved over here because they came here for a visit and then just stayed. They loved it so much. And Harry was writing a lot of humorous science fiction. I got to know his work through 2000 AD. They did an adaptation of his story, The Stainless Steel Rat, which is science fiction humorous stuff set in the far future. But a galaxy is basically kind of homogenized and everybody's very kind of dull and boring, and nothing really happening except this future. Well, this crook appears out of nowhere. It's a stainless steel rat. The idea is that in running through the wainscoting of the average house, you might get rodents. In the gleaming spires of the future, you'll get stainless steel rats. So he's a crook. He's a con man, a thief, a bank robber, but he's kind of got a good heart. They're tremendously fun books and at times genuinely hilarious. And that's kind of, I've been a huge science fiction fan before I read any Harry's stuff. He steered the way I appreciated and understood science fiction, that good science fiction shouldn't be so much about the science as it is about the fiction. That's just my interpretation, but luckily it's also the right interpretation. His stories are much more down to earth and humorous than the big po-faced pot-boiler science fiction novels of the same era when he started writing, the 50s and 60s, which were all about spaceships that were 5 miles long and giant galactic empires fighting each other on a daily basis, or the opposite end, which is the stories that are kind of cold and sterile and no life to them. Hardy kind of fell between these two ideas, these two concepts, if you like, but wrote about much more down-to-earth people.
Reading up on his profile on Wikipedia, and it's kind of a bit heady. So has yourself actually quoted, saying, imagine Pirates of the Caribbean or Raiders of the Lost Ark. Picture them as a science fiction novel. They're rip-roaring adventures that are full of heart.
Yeah,
that's one.
Did I say that?
I don't know. It says you said it, so if the internet says it, you must have. And then quoted after that is Christopher Priest. I read some of his books, and I really liked the movie The Prestige, which was based on his stories. His most popular fast-moving parodies are homages to space operas.
Yeah.
Terry Pratchett himself says that he felt his sci-fi humour was even better than The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Them's fighting words.
Well, are they indeed? Are they? Now, Douglas Adams is one of my favourite writers of all time.
Mm-hmm. I have to sort of say I'm of an age, and I think for some people think it's like the music you listen to in your teens, you seem to carry with you for your life. Whereas I've found with humour, whatever you kind of hit kind of in your early teens, I think informs you for the rest of your life. And I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of arrived just then for me. You carry it and you say, oh, this is fantastic, I love it, blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of get out in the world and you say, but he didn't come from nowhere. He was coming from this, which came from this, which came from this, which even, you can go all the way back to Jonathan Swift, all of his tales, and you're going to go, okay, I didn't realise it had that kind of antecedents.
Yeah, well, of course, that's the key thing. Harry, I think he lost a bunch of fans back in whenever it was Hitchhikers came out as a book, and Harry and a few other writers were interviewed on television about how great it was. Mm-hmm. I think it was on Pebble Mill or one of those shows, but how great Hitchhikers was. Harry said, someone said it's got, something like more ideas than any 10 other science fiction novels, and Harry said, it's got the same ideas from 10 other science fiction novels. Which did not go down very well. But his point was that there wasn't anything that original in Hitchhikers. Not that it wasn't good, because we talked about it and he did enjoy it. It's just that the originality didn't come from the storyline in Hitchhikers. It came from the wordplay and the humour. Yeah, I'd say Douglas Adams as being one of my great influences. Himself and Terry Pratchett in terms of how they use words. And Harry in terms of how he presents stories. Whereas Harry wasn't a great man for the wordsmithing. He was a great man for crafting his tale and for getting... I mean, God, have you ever seen someone sitting on a train jumping up and down with excitement because they're reading a really good bit in the book? It almost never happens, but it used to happen to me reading his stories, because they are so much fun. Yeah. You just get so engrossed in them, and a lot of his stories were of their time, with humour that doesn't travel, as in time-wise, it doesn't travel through time.
Yeah, I kind of looking at his kind of body of work, it kind of seems to have been a little bit before its time, but then it went through its time. It's like it was post-war, and everyone was kind of rah jingoistic about the military, but he seems to have gone into the military and served, and come out a bit tainted by the experience. And his books and like his Galactic Bill is a kind of meant to be a satire of the whole experience. From Bill, the Galactic Hero by Harry Harrison, 1965. A total of 89,672,899 recruits had already been shipped into space through Camp Leon Trotsky, so the process was an automatic and smoothly working one, even though this time it was processing itself, like a snake swallowing its own tail. Bill and his buddies were the last group of recruits through, and the snake began ingesting itself right behind them. No sooner had they been shorn of their sprouting fuzz and deloused in the ultrasonic delouser than the barbers rushed at each other in a welter of under and overarms, gobbets of hair, shards of mustache, bits of flesh, drops of blood. They clipped and shaved each other, then pulled the operator after them into the ultrasonic chamber. Medical corpsmen gave themselves injections against rocket fever and space cafard. Record clerks issued themselves paybooks, and the loadmasters kicked each other up the ramps and into the waiting shuttle ships. Rockets blasted. Living columns of fire like scarlet tongues licking down at the blasting pads, burning up the ramps in a lovely pyrotechnic display, since the ramp operators were also aboard. The ships echoed and thundered up into the night sky, leaving Camp Leon Trotsky, a dark and silent ghost town where bits of daily orders and punishment rosters rustled and blew from the bulletin boards, dancing through the deserted streets to finally plaster themselves against the noisy bright windows of the officers' club, where a great drinking party was in progress, although there was much complaining because the officers had to serve themselves. Up and up the shuttle ships shot towards the great fleet of deep spacers that darkened the stars above. A new fleet, the most powerful the galaxy had ever seen, so new in fact that the ships were still under construction. Welding torches flared in brilliant points of light, while hot rivets hurled their flat trajectories across the sky into waiting buckets. The spots of light died away as one behemoth of star lanes was completed, and thin screams sounded in the spacesuit radio circuits as the workers, instead of being returned to the yards, were pressed into service on the ship they had so recently built. This was total war. Bill staggered through the sagging plastic tube that connected the shuttle ship to a dreadnought of space and dropped his bags in front of a petty chief officer who sat at a desk in a hangar-sized space lock. Or rather, he tried to drop it, but since there was no gravity, the bags remained in mid-air, and when he pushed them down, he rose. Since a body, when it is falling freely, is said to be in free fall, and anything with weight has no weight, and for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, or something like that. The petty looked up and snarled and pulled Bill back down to the desk. "None of your bowy space lubber tricks, trooper. Name?" "Bill," spelt with 2 L's. "Bill," the petty mumbled, licking the end of his stylo, then inscribing it in the ship's roster around a litter of letters. 2 L's are for officers only.
It was, yeah. It was actually a direct response to a lot of the jingoistic books and gung-ho books that were out at the time, especially science fiction. People like Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, which when we see the movie version of Starship Troopers, it's kind of done as a satire.
Yeah, so I put that's why I struggled to put the two together, because
the book is not done as a satire.
Mm-hmm.
The book is done quite seriously, and Heinlein believed in a lot of the ideas that he presented in the book. At least that's how I understand it.
Sure.
But Harry's reaction to that with Build a Galactic Hero was basically to write the antithesis. I mean, and if you look at them now, Build a Galactic Hero still stands up as a tremendously powerful and influential anti-war story. I mean, it's hilarious at times. I mean, it's really silly and funny, but there's the message behind that is incredibly strong. Whereas if you try and read Starship Troopers now, I mean, it reads like a Republican Convention manifesto or something. It's really dark.
Yeah.
I mean, Heinlein was quite right wing in that respect, and Hardy was very much on the left wing.
So it sounds to me that maybe the movie was actually inspired somewhat by his work, and it wouldn't be the first one either. So I was interested to find out one of his earlier books too, Make Room, was actually the precursor to the film Soylent Green. Yeah, but the whole cannibalism bit wasn't. Spoilers. Spoilers.
You just spoiled it.
Shh, spoilers. They're people. Isn't that technically the movie of spoilers about spoilers? That the whole thing is a spoiler at the end.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a huge fan of Harry's work because of 2000 Days. So I was getting the books as I could afford them. Mm-hmm. And I saw the movie Soylent Green, which I knew was based on one of his books, but I saw that before I read the book. Mm-hmm. And so you get to the end of the movie and you sit there going, oh my God, because it's a really powerful movie the first time. If you don't know what's happening in it, it's a really powerful film. But then when you read the book, you go, hang on a minute, it's the same atmosphere, but it doesn't have the same plot.
Yeah. Well, I was reading the Cliff Notes on it, so maybe you can speak to this better. It actually feels a bit like a precursor to the world you see in Mega City 1. You know, the kind of gated communities and people kind of being cheek by jowl because it's so populated. And I'm wondering, is his path into 2000 AD kind of informed maybe where they were going in the early days as well?
It's been established and confirmed that the people creating Judge Dredd read a lot of science fiction, so they would have been influenced by what they read. So I don't know, maybe they read, one of them read John Wagner or Pat Mills, maybe read Make Room, and saw the overpopulation as being one of the key problems. But I don't know. It's very hard to pin exact things like that. I know it is very clear that if you grew up reading 2000 AD and then the Stainless Steel Rat story, Harry's adaptation, if it started, it fit in so perfectly with what they were doing. You'd almost think the Stainless Steel Rat had been written specially for the comic. Mm-hmm. It fits in so brilliantly. It is one of my. I mean, after Dredd, Stainless Rat is my favorite thing in the comic, and I've been reading it since year one. So that was 1977.
Wow.
So yeah, I have got every single issue. But it's been, when you think about it, I mean, 2000 AD led me to Harry Harrison, and that led me to becoming a science fiction writer, which led me to writing for 2000 AD. So that's a pretty good loop, you know.
And now the circle is complete.
Yes, yeah. Hopefully, at some point somewhere down the road, someone will read something I've written, and they'll say, that led me to becoming a writer, and now I write, for 2000 or whatever else it is. So that's a nice way of doing things. Because I had the great advantage with Harry is that not only was I a huge fan, but he lived in Dublin, and he, in fact, at one point lived only a couple of miles from where I was living. Mm-hmm. So I used to bump into him occasionally, and then we got to know each other. We became friends. We used to go out to dinner with ourselves and Joan, who's Harry's wife, who was one of the most wonderful and funny and dark and brilliant people I ever met. She was hilarious, very, very smart. Oh, absolutely smart as a whip. It was hilarious watching Harry trying to tell an anecdote, and Joan would sit there beside him, editing his story as he goes along, correcting him because he would remember it his way and she would remember the truth. And So he would have this constant stream of narration beside him as she's editing the tale and correcting where they were and who said what actually and all that. They were so much fun together. Yeah, so we got to know Harry really well, and he gave me feedback on my very first attempts at writing a novel and that kind of thing.
I mean, that must have been amazing, because he appears to have been a contemporary, at least, of Isaac Asimov. And
yeah, they were contemporaries.
And, well, it says that he was a member of the Hydro Club in New York around the same time Asimov was there. So the kind of that kind of vintage, or how many movies now have spun off from Asimov's ideas or concepts and little ideas.
That's something that we used to talk about a lot, myself and Harry, when we used to go to every time you get two writers together to go into a bitching session about everybody else. But he would yeah, of course you have to be. But he used to complain about the fact that there was, according to the rest of the world, the mainstream world, the mundane world, there's only ever been 4 or 5 science fiction writers. There's Asimov, there's Clarke, there's Heinlein, maybe there's Harlan Ellison, and of course, did I say R.C. Clarke? R.C. whatever, yeah. And so there's Philip K. Dick, of course. Of course. But in reality, of course, there was thousands of science fiction writers, and most of them were producing much better work than those guys.
Yeah, but well, maybe like our vocabulary has kind of changed so much. I grew up in the 80s and 90s and I wanted the Spider-Man movie. I wanted the Batman movie. And I mean, I don't know if you remember in the early 90s, Cameron was attached to a Spider-Man movie, Jim Cameron.
I have the treatment here on my desk. Yes. And
they wanted to put him into like a suit of armor or something.
Yep.
And I said, what are you doing? And everyone was just kind of, we've got something here, but they could never trust the story. They had to kind of take the look and twist it. And then finally in 2001, when Sam Raimi put out Spider-Man, it was the Spider-Man. You knew he looked like it, he moved like it, he had the same background, and it exploded. And it was the first time they kind of said, oh, wait a minute, maybe these comic books, which have been going on for the past 50 years and been successful, were successful for a reason. And now it didn't happen straight away. Like X-Men, I think, kind of had fits and starts, and they kind of really didn't get into it. But now we kind of seem to be in this age of they're just kind of dipping into the comic books altogether. Yeah. And then they're almost too massive that the real interesting stories now, in my old age, are now moving to TV and Netflix and box sets, and like The Witcher was kind of one of the more interesting ones recently, that they kind of got into that story and kind of let it be what it was.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good example. Yeah, it is funny. It was almost like, we love this thing, so we must change it. I think, what's the point of that? But we saw, actually, if we go back to humour again, back to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the original radio series was adapted as a book, and then we had a TV show and so forth. But if you look at compared, say, the TV show with the movie there from wherever it was 10 years ago, they're very, very different.
Yeah, but yeah. I honestly feel that the book and the radio show were definitely of a time.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely of a time. And then when that movie came around, that time no longer existed.
Yeah.
That post-oil crisis 70s, and kind of everything being a bit threadbare, and him wearing his tatty dressing gown and towel. It just seemed to be kind of what it was like then. And then by the early 2000s, we got smartphones. I don't know, it just didn't ring.
Yeah, well, an awful lot of the jokes in Hitchhikers, and I know the first few books pretty much off by heart, an awful lot of jokes don't work anymore because partly because other people have mimicked them so often that the jokes have become stale.
Sure.
And that happens a lot. Well, as you know,
that's good success, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. You basically get killed by your own success. Because I've had younger people that fans of my kids' books that I've recommended over the years. You need to read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You really need to read Dirk Gently. And they read them and they go, yeah, okay, I didn't get it. Partly because they haven't got the context that we had, but also because they know all those gags, but also because things like a lot of jokes haven't worked over time. For example, the Vogon poetry thing, which was hilarious. I loved that, and I can even recite the Vogon poem now.
No, you'll drive away all our listeners.
See, that's the point. That was funny when we were kids. That's not funny anymore because it's been done by Douglas and by others. It's been done that, the poem is so bad that someone's own intestines would jump out to their throat and throttle them, Yeah. That joke is old now. So one of the great advantages we have with science fiction is that the ideas don't often get old. So we have, well, of course they do, but it's less likely for a science fiction story to age than it is for a detective novel or something like that.
I totally agree, but if you had told me 20 years ago we'd be sitting at home during a pandemic talking to each other over the internet and having a conversation, it's like, mad.
Yeah. It's the future.
This is it. We're living it right now.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get our flying cars and our holidays on Mars and our robot butlers and our jetpacks.
Did you not get the jetpack?
Well, mine's on back order. Yeah. But yeah, this is the future that we didn't know we were going to have. Yeah, it's a strange thing, isn't it? How did we get here? How did we get here? But yes.
Oh, who's the king? Tell me.
So how do we? Yes, where were we? Humor in science fiction. Yeah. Oh yeah. We must mention, of course, that Douglas Adams and Harry Harrison are not the only two.
Absolutely.
I was a huge fan, and still am, of a fellow called Bob Shaw, who was an Englishman, but he grew up in, I think it was English. Oh, maybe he was, no, wait, he grew up in Northern Ireland. Maybe he was a Northern Irishman. But nevertheless, he was nearly Irish, and that's the important thing.
All right.
Tremendously funny stories at times. He wrote one of my favorite ever humor books called Who Goes Here, which is, it's one of those books that you can't even tell someone what it's about, because once you do, that kind of spoils half of the gag.
Okay.
But that was a good one.
So tell me about it.
Okay, because since you love the spoilers on your
spoilers.
Show. Okay, Who Goes Here opens with the hero, whose name is Warren Peace, waking up in a sort of a doctor's room. He's not sure what's happened. Something's going on. He realizes that all he knows about himself is his name. Everything else is gone. Gradually then, over the course of the next chapter, he realizes that he's had his memory wiped. And there's a process. He's joined the Space Foreign Legion, basically. Okay, and one of the things they do, the way you join the Foreign Legion to forget?
They literally make you forget.
Yeah, they literally they have a machine that makes you forget. What you do is you focus on the part of your life that you don't want to remember anymore. The machine identifies this and makes you forget it. So all these people are joining the Foreign Legion, as it were, the Space Legion, and they don't know why they're there. But of course, the thing is, almost all of them will know. They know but they know that they know who they were. But Warren has absolutely no memories of his life whatsoever, and he realized that whatever it was he was trying to forget, it must be so horrible that he had to blank his entire life out.
Very good.
And it goes on from there.
Oh, that's interesting, because we mentioned Christopher Priest earlier, and he had a similar story. It wasn't played for humour. It's kind of a real sort of metaphysical idea. If in this competition you can win, there's a process that can make you live forever. The only thing is the process wipes your brain, and you never remember anything ever again.
Oh.
So you can kind of write down, so they're not trying to hide anything for you. You can write down as much as you want about your life before the process, and on the other side you're given the books, but you will never remember anything.
Okay.
Would you take it? It's kind of the...
Wow, yeah, because that's the death of personality thing, isn't it? That you effectively kill yourself.
To live forever.
To live forever, yeah. I love that idea.
Yeah.
I don't think I've read that. What's that book? Or is that a story?
I think it might be one of his short ones.
I must have a look.
Yeah.
It doesn't ring any bells now, but it is a lovely idea. I love Christopher Priest as a writer in general. He's done some amazing work, but that's a good one. Who else is funny? Okay, there's a fellow called William Tenn that nobody knows anymore.
Okay.
And he wrote a lot of short stories. A whole bunch of them were collected in the 70s in a bunch of science fiction novels, or science fiction anthologies, if you like, collections of his tales. But his stuff is quite dark humor, but also quite bizarre at times. But one of my favorites of his is a novel called Of Men and Monsters. And the idea is that giant creatures have landed on Earth and basically established Earth as their home. And the people end up living in the walls like mice would in the house. It's a brilliant story. William Tenn was a great one. Frederick Brown, another brilliant humorous science fiction writer, wrote a lot of really, really good stuff. In particular, one called What Mad Universe. That was a great one. But probably the best of the lot in terms of just pure madness would have been John Sladek. Mm-hmm. And Sladek, again, almost completely unknown these days, wrote a brilliant book called TikTok, which was about a robot. Most of his books seem to be about robots. TikTok is about a robot who decides that he wants to be a murderer, so he does. Then there's Roderick and Roderick at Random. Roderick is about an artificially intelligent robot, and it's got some of the funniest passages I've ever read in my life. But my favourite book of his is one called Bugs, which is about a science fiction writer who gets accidentally contracted to develop or to work with a team developing an artificially intelligent robot. And it's hilarious stuff, but for some reason, Sladek is almost unknown these days. It's very strange.
Yeah, well, are people reading those? But like, I think a lot of that stories have moved on into the movies now. It's like Ex Machina, that kind of world. They're not played for fun or humor.
No,
they
should be. Someone made a movie version of Bugs, Bugs, B-U-G-S, Bugs,
right.
And they stuck to it.
Sure.
I think that could be very successful.
Now, is that what we need to laugh at it before it actually happens, and then we find out it's not terribly funny? That our robot overlords kind of aren't too happy with us.
Yeah. I'm not spoiling anything. Yes. Because the humor is always subjective. So what we find as hilarious, other people could just find as dark, and that's why it works. I think
possibly
because there's something kind of naughty about laughing at something that you know is horrible. But it didn't. What was it? Mel Brooks said that if you fall down an open manhole sewer and die, that's funny. But if I cut my finger, it's a tragedy. Mm-hmm. It's all to do with how we perceive things.
I think said it before. Is it tragedy plus times equal comedy?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's it. I mean, no matter how big something is, eventually someone will find a way to laugh at it. And not just mean people, but, everybody in general.
Well, there was the big scandal last year, or was it 2 years ago, where they tried to say they were going to do a sitcom about the famine in Ireland. People go, oh, too soon. And he was like, okay, it's a bit dark, I suppose. I kind of was curious to see what they might do with that, but it's a very... I think Derry Girls is probably a good example of when you take apart what was going on during that time.
Yeah.
But realised people had to get through it, and they did. And that's exactly where they landed it, and just to have like these soldiers in the background with guns, and you're going to go, oh yeah.
That's exactly what to do it, because the Derry Girls is about the people, it's not about the politics.
Mm-hmm.
And the average person, they don't really understand or care about the politics. And actually, I would reckon Derry Girls is one of the best comedies I've seen in
a long time,
20 years or more. I mean, it stands out above anything. It's probably my favorite sitcom since Dinner Ladies, which to my mind is one of the best things ever. It just really works.
Well, I think it's kind of good that, because so much of like Ireland, like even Father Ted was quite, they hid the accents a bit. Everyone kind of spoke quite well, and very rarely would they kind of let the people sound like they'd sound, because they were worried. So this, and is it Young Offenders that's on at the moment with the strong Cork accents?
Yeah.
But now that they're kind of, I don't know, there's been an appetite for it, for a bit of difference, and the fact that Derry Girls can even have these people speaking in such a strong vernacular and be successful, I think it's fantastic. That they're comfortable enough, and I mean, we're only 30 years from Commitments where they wanted to put that out with subtitles.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. I know, it's one of those weird things, isn't it? Yeah. But I have to say that I haven't actually seen The Young Offenders, but it's one of those things people keep recommending things to me, and the more they recommend it, the less inclined I am to watch them.
Really?
Until one day I just go, right, I will, and I give in. That's happened to Derry Girls. Yeah, Derry Girls season 2 was out, I think, before we finally got around to watching it, and then absolutely loved it. And of course now thinking, well, we wasted all that time not watching it.
Well, I have a special place. Like, I've only really seen the movie. I haven't got to the TV series. The TV series is kind of like a remake of the movie. It's not like a continuation. But I'm a Cork man myself. And,
oh no, I'm so sorry.
Yes. Oh, whoa. Yeah. My family is from down there. And it was kind of having been surrounded by it, and to actually hear them be comfortable, because like sometimes they have phrases that people don't understand at all. And in the TV show that they kind of were comfortable just to let it be. And once it's a bit like, I don't know if you've ever read the book Trainspotting.
Oh, I have, yes, absolutely.
You start reading it, it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's written in I dialect.
Yep.
And it's just your brain's turned. And then I think I got to the second or third chapter, and it's like you just like sink into it, and then you're fine from that point on. It's an amazing trick,
Yeah.
The kind of, but it does scare you off the first chapter, and you're like, well, oh god, it's as bad as Joyce,
Yeah.
And I think it was very effective, but to kind of to stick with it and get through it, I just think the effect was even better.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Trainspotting book and movie, even though they're not the same, not quite the same, they work brilliantly together. They're a great sort of combination. But I had it's a while back. I remember having to explain a lot of the Scottish dialogue in Trainspotting movie to some American friends who just didn't get it. Yeah, and I go, well, I mean, they think Ireland and Scotland are pretty much the same because we're only a stone's throw away. But no, very different.
I've had that. It's like if I compared you to Americans to Canada. What? We're completely different people.
Yeah.
And I rest my case. Anyway, Michael, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, thank you very
much. Harry Harrison. Hopefully you'll come on again. Anything else you want to mention or push before we sign off for today?
Can't think of anything specific.
Big on the horizon? What's the lockdown been doing to your creativity?
Oh, it's been weird, actually. Yeah. Because it hasn't really changed me directly.
Yeah, because you were largely working from home.
Yeah, exactly. I've been working from home for 21 years now, so I'm used to it. But what's weird is that my wife is also working from home, so she's saving 15, 16 hours a week travel, which is amazing because that's a huge chunk of your week. I mean, that 16 hours is that's 9% of your week. That's pretty good. So she's got a lot more time, and so it's great. And it means, of course, I don't have to worry about her getting home from work because she's just here. So that's brilliant. But other than that, it's not really directly affecting us. Indirectly, we can't see our friends and family. That's tough. What about you? I'm sure it's the same.
Oh, I just recently had a baby, so I'm stuck home looking for that. I was going to be home anyway, so it didn't really affect. But yeah, I just think being at home, it's been a resurgence of creativity. People are, after a few weeks, going, well, I guess I better finish that thing I started.
Yeah, but that's good. That's good because the worst thing is having something hanging over that you keep meaning to get around to doing. But now, work-wise, nothing has changed for me really. I don't think so. Yeah.
And then he releases 15 more books. It's like, that's normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I have my bookmaking machine here. I just turn the handle and another book pops out.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right, sure. We'll let you off with that. Thanks you so much for being on today, and we'll have you on again. Goodbye.